This is Coates87, and I'll be demonstrating how to play PS2 games with PCSX2 on Linux. PCSX2 is a PlayStation 2 emulator I use for playing my PS2 games on Linux. This emulator is currently available on Windows, Mac, and Linux. Like with my DuckStation video, I will be using GPU screen recorder, so there shouldn't be any issues with showing off games in full screen mode on the Steam Deck. First, we need to visit the PCSX2 website. Now we can download the latest stable build, but that doesn't get updated very often. As you can see, there are options for downloading the stable build for Windows, Mac, and Linux. Instead, we'll go with the latest nightly build, and we'll be using an AppImage for this video. By default, the file should download to the Downloads folder. Now let's open the directory where we downloaded the file. For the sake of ease, I've decided to rename the file to PCSX2.AppImage. While optional, I decided to move the PCSX2 AppImage file into a different folder. Next, we want to look up the PS BIOS claim tool from archive.org. See the link in the description for details. Download either version of the PS BIOS claim tool. Unzip the zip file. Open the unzipped folder. In it, there will be two subfolders. If you are using Windows, use the Windows folder. Since this is a Linux tutorial, we'll be using the Linux folder. The firmware BIOS claim.sh file is a script file that extracts the PS1 and PS2 BIOS from RPCS3. The Windows equivalent would be the firmware BIOS claim.bat file. Before starting up the firmware BIOS claim file, let's take a look at the README file. You want to follow the steps shown above. Now, I'll copy the firmware BIOS claim file in the same directory as the RPCS3 AppImage file. Make sure that the RPCS3 AppImage file is named rpcs3.appimage. Let's start up RPCS3. In the log for RPCS3, you'll notice that it is using the PS3 firmware version 4.92. This is the current firmware that is available on the PlayStation website. Unfortunately, this firmware is too new to work for the firmware BIOS claim file, as that file only worked for firmware versions 4.91 or older. If you don't have a backup of an older firmware, don't worry. I'll show off how to get an older firmware with a PS3 game. This will require having a Blu Ray Disc Drive. The game I will be using for this part of the tutorial will be 3D.Game Heroes. I'll be using this Blu Ray Disc Drive for this part of the tutorial. Now I'll minimize RPCS3 and put the game in the Blu Ray Disc Drive. Mount the disc, as we need access to a particular file on the disc. After mounting the disc, look for a folder called PS3 Update and open the folder. In this folder lies the PS3 firmware file. copy this file. I'll be copying this file into the Downloads folder. Now I'll use the copy firmware file from my game for our PCS3. Drag and drop the firmware file to our PCS3. Click Yes. You'll get a message stating that you are trying to install an older firmware. Click Yes. Click Yes again. Click OK and wait for our PCS3 to get done compiling the modules. Note the version of the PS3 firmware that we've just installed. This will be important later in the video. Now you can close our PCS3. Let's take another look at the PS BIOS claim tool. Since the firmware I've installed is version 3.15 based off the log tab in our PCS3, I'll want to pay attention to this section of the README. While you can just double click on the firmware BIOS claim.sh file to run it, for demonstration purposes, I will run this file in the console. Drag and drop the firmware BIOS claim.sh file into the console window. Make sure to allow executing file as program for this file. Back on the console window, press the Enter key to extract the PS2 BIOS file. It looks like it couldn't extract all of the BIOS files. For my purpose, I just need the PS2 BIOS file. This is the PS2 BIOS file we need. Copy the PS2 BIOS file into the directory you want PCSX2 to read the BIOS from. Now, like in the RPCS3 video, we need to bring up the properties for the AppImage file we just downloaded. Then we need to click on the Permissions tab and click on the Allow Executing File as Program checkbox. This will be needed in order to start up the PCSX2 AppImage file. Start up the PCSX2 AppImage file. If you've seen the DuckStation video, this screen should be familiar. Here, we want PCSX2 to point to where we have our BIOS file located. On the Game Directories tab, we want to set what directories we want PCSX2 to find our PS2 games. This is where I have my PS2 games stored. I'll show off how to copy a physical PS2 game onto Linux later in the video. Note that, unlike DuckStation, PCSX2 currently doesn't support M3U playlist file. This means that it won't support the easy disk swapping feature for multi-disc games, unlike DuckStation. If you have your games in subfolders, you can have PCSX2 scan recursively. For this video, I will not use PCSX2 to scan recursively. Like with the DuckStation video, we'll need to set up the controls. Since I'm on the Steam Deck, I'll be using that as the first controller for this emulator. Now, PCSX2 sees our games. Let's add some covers for these games. Head to this site above. Scroll down until the text PCSX2 has its own cover downloader shows up. Copy the first box by clicking on the copy icon. Go to Tools, Cover Downloader on PCSX2. Paste in the text we've copied and click on the Use Title File Names checkbox. Click the Start button to download the covers. Now we have our covers for our PS2 game. This is the settings menu for PCSX2. See the bottom of the window herein called Tooltips section for an explanation of each of the tabs. Hover on an option to see what that option does in the Tooltips section. This is the BIOS directory. Unless you like seeing the PS2 boot screen, you can leave the fast boot option checked. If you are not using a BIOS dump from a real PS2, don't uncheck that option. Here, we need to create a virtual PS2 memory card. Start by ejecting the memory card from slot 1. If you want to have your memory card stored in a specific location, you can set it here by clicking the Browse button. To create a new virtual PS2 memory card, click on the Create button. Here, we can give our memory card a name and specify its memory size for storing PS2 game save. I'll be using the 32 megabytes option. Click OK to create the card. Now right-click your newly created memory card and add it into slot 1. For those who really like the achievements system first popularized on the Xbox 360, you can look into retro achievements. This video will not be covering this, however. Now we want to customize our controls. Click on the Controller Port 1 tab. Here's where you can customize the button layout for your controller. With the exception of a few very early PS2 games, we won't need to bind the analog button to the Steam button on the Steam Deck, guide button on Xbox controllers. Hover on a button for the PS2 controller to see how to bind and clear buttons for those actions. I'll be clearing the analog button since most games don't use it. Here's where I map the Steam Guide button to the Open Pause menu hotkey. Note the tooltip here. This mentions how to change a binding, add additional bindings, and how to clear a binding. For my purpose, I'm going to add an additional binding since I don't feel comfortable with not having a keyboard option for bringing up PCSX2 overlay. Now I'll add the Steam/Guide button to the Open Pause menu hotkey. Now I'll create a new preset for these controls. This new input profile will be used for most of the PS2 games in my library, with the exception of DOA2. I would recommend selecting Yes on this window, and Yes on this window too. I'm now going to create another input profile. This one will specifically be for DOA2 since that game doesn't automatically turn on the analog mode. For DOA2's input profile, we'll map the analog button to the View button on the Steam Deck. Note that by default, the Steam Deck uses something called Lizard Mode for its controller. You'll want to turn it off by holding the menu button for a few seconds until you hear a small beep before binding the View button. Not doing so will bind the Tab key and the View button to that action. If you are using a different controller, you won't have to worry about this. If you end up forgetting to turn off Lizard Mode after binding the View button, you can change the bind in one of the INI files. Let's try out Big Picture mode. This mode will allow us to use PCSX2 with a controller. This feature also exists in DuckStation. Let's try out Siphon Filter Dark Mirror. This game was originally released on the PSP before getting a PS2 port.
Teresa, I'm ready to start.
Thanks for helping me test this new obstacle course, Gabe.
No problem. Just pretend I'm a new recruit.
Okay, your goal in this training mission is to learn basic agency navigation and maneuvers. Follow the arrows and my instructions to reach the agency flag. Once you've learned the basics, you can try the mission again and attempt to break the record time. Are you ready?
Ready.
Go.
While some are okay with playing their PS2 games as they were intended to look, I prefer to make it look a bit prettier. I'll start by making sure it's using the Vulkan renderer. If you are on Windows, you'll have access to the DirectX renderer as well. Now I'll change the aspect ratio. Some games don't natively support widescreen. For those games, try enabling the widescreen patches. By default, PCSX2 renders at the native resolution for PS2 games. I'll be increasing the resolution to 720p 1280 by 720. Now the game looks a bit sharper.
To drop down, either press the X button or press the left analog stick down.
Got it.
To find hidden magnetic locks, use your EDSU goggles.
What's that stand for again?
Electronic Device Sensing Utility. It'll pick up any electronic or magnetic signal. Your goggles CPU filters out all non-relevant signals. To equip your goggles, press and hold the left directional button, then press the square button to select EDSU. To turn your goggles on or off, tap the left directional button. You have to shoot the magnetic lock to open the hidden door. To equip your weapon, press and hold the right directional button. Then press the square button to select your pistol. To fire your weapon, press the R1 button.
Like with Duck Station, to quit out of a game in PCSX2, press the hotkey for the Open Pause menu action and select Close Game. Just for fun, I decided to change the resolution back to what the PS2 uses. Now let's try out DOA 2 Hardcore. Like with Siphon Filter Dark Mirror, let's try making this game look better than it did on the PS2. I'll start by enabling the widescreen patches and the no interlacing patches. Next, I'll bump up the resolution to 720p again. You can use FXAA, which is a type of anti-aliasing, to reduce the number of jagged pixels. I won't be using that setting for this game. Now I'll be setting that special control profile for DOA 2 I've made earlier in the video. Just for fun, let's see what the game looks like when using software renderer mode. This is what the game looks like using the software renderer. Since we are using the AppImage version of PCSX2, I think it would be cool to have a desktop icon for it. To do that, we need to create a text file and name it PCSX2.desktop. Next, we'll need an icon for our desktop file. We can get an icon from the PCSX2's website. Right-click on the icon and select Open Image in New tab. Save the image. A WEBP file will work just fine as an icon. And yes, the image is transparent. I'll name this image PCSX2 logo.webp and save it in the Downloads folder. Then I'll copy the image in the same directory as the AppImage file. Next, we'll need to open the desktop file in a text editor. I'm setting up the text editor to be side by side with the File Explorer. First, we'll want to type in desktop entry on the first line. I'm going to fast forward through a bit of this. Now that we've finished making our desktop file, let's go over some of the major aspects of this file. We don't want to launch PCSX2 in a terminal, so we'll set the terminal field to false. Type, name, keywords, generic name, and categories are all used for searching for an application in the application launcher. Think of the application launcher as the Linux equivalent to the Windows Start menu. You can add this desktop file in the following directory above if you want. The main two we want to focus on are the exec and icon fields. The exec field will store the path of the AppImage file. If this path contains any spaces, make sure to surround it with double quotes. The icon field will give your desktop file an icon to make it stand out. Use the path of the image file you want for your desktop file. You won't need to use double quotes for this field, even if the path has spaces. When you are ready, save your desktop file and close the text editor. We need to right-click on the desktop file and select Property. Then we need to click on the Permissions tab and click on the Allow Executing File as Program checkbox. This will be needed in order to start up the PCSX2 AppImage file via the desktop file. Now you can copy the desktop file onto the desktop. Neat! Now you can just double click on this file to open up PCSX2. Now let's try to dump or copy a PS2 game onto Linux for PCSX2. First, let's start up a CD utility tool. I'll be using Brasero for this. Next, let's put in a PS2 disc in the DVD drive. I'll be using my copy of Dragon Quest VIII. Don't mount the DVD. Next, click on the Disk Copy option. On this screen, change the Select a Disk to Write to drop down to Image File. Click on the Properties button to change the file name and the directory you want to dump your game into. For this example, I'll dump the game in the same directory as my other PS2 games. Click on the Create Image button to create the ISO file. Click the Close button. Now let's take a look at our newly dumped game. We've successfully dumped our game as an ISO file. Select Settings, Scan for New Games to show the newly added game. You can also scan for new games on the Game List tab. Now, I just need to add the cover for my new game. Now let's try out Dragon Quest VIII. Enjoy this brief look at Dragon Quest VIII.
Oi, Gov! It's gonna get dark if we hang about here much longer. Let's head into town. There's better... Shake a leg, Gov!